අද්විතීය 200 Mbps ස්පීඩ් එකකින් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ වේගවත්ම සහ පුළුල්තම හෝම් බ්‍රෝඩ්බෑන්ඩ් සම්බන්ධතාවය වන SLT මොබිටෙල් දේශීය ෆයිබර් බලවේගය ඔබත් අදම අත්විඳින්න.
හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Wednesday the 12th of April 2023. Confident. The central bank chief believes that China will deliver on Sri Lanka's debt restructuring requirements as soon as possible.
It's best interest for China and Sri Lanka both to complete this process soon and we can get back to repaying our debt service obligations.
While also highlighting better growth prospects.
We would expect some small negative contraction, not as much as IMF predict. We think we would end up somewhere like 1 to 2% contraction this year.
Creditor support. Finance ministers of Japan, India and France to announce the launch of a debt restructuring negotiation process for Sri Lanka tomorrow. Essential. IMF's managing director calls on all Sri Lankans to come together to do their part to overcome the crisis. Assures continued support for Sri Lanka. In the pipeline. The Asian Development Bank considers in providing more concessionary funding for Sri Lanka.
Alliance Finance මෙතුරු රන්නයි සේවාවෙන් රන් පවුම්කට රුපියල් 1,70,000ක ඉහළ අධිකාරම.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. In your top story for tonight, the governor of the central bank, Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, says that he believes that China will deliver on Sri Lanka's debt restructuring requirements as soon as possible. During an interview with Bloomberg, the CBSL chief said that it is in the best interest for China and Sri Lanka both to complete the debt restructuring process soon in order for the country to get back onto repaying the country's distressed obligations. The governor further pointed out that they expect Sri Lanka's economy to contract between 1% to 2% by this year's end instead of the IMF's forecasted amount of 3%.
What do you expect China to do, or how do you expect to get them on board, stop dragging their feet?
I hope, as they have done the right thing for Sri Lanka, giving us financing assurances last time, I think this is probably the first time China has given it that fast. Obviously, with the help of the IMF and other partners also help to share information. We hope that China would, obviously China is a country that has been helping Sri Lanka for a long time. Have invested a lot. It's best interest for China and Sri Lanka both to complete this process soon and we can get back to repaying our debt service obligations sooner the better for both China and Sri Lanka. This is what we think. China will certainly support Sri Lanka. As they already expressed in public, they want to support Sri Lanka. We are confident that China will support as they have done in the last time also in the process.
What response have you gotten so far when it comes to bondholders for the proposed voluntary local debt restructuring that's happening right now?
If you can remember, about 2 weeks ago, I think we made an announcement in public on a very transparent manner how we intend to make a contribution from local debt optimization, where we announced that central bank holdings of T-bills would be considered for some treatment. And in addition, there will be voluntary treatment for treasury bonds that is comparable with other treatments, so that we want to make our contribution from the local side. And also in terms of our contribution, we have already made commitments with the IMF in terms of primary surpluses in the fiscal deficit and also growth targets, inflation, all these things are our commitments. In addition, next step is to have some kind of domestic debt optimization. Then the sequencing is that after we announce that strategy, we are committed to announce our strategy by end of April. Then we can continue the process with commercial creditors, asset bilateral creditors to make it complete.
Where do you see inflation going? Where do you see the economy going? Will these reforms slow the economy down?
In terms of inflation, what we see from the central bank point of view, as a result of very tight monetary policy. Already disinflation process started, and by the end of this year, we are confident we will reach single-digit inflation. This inflation path is clear our projection that we will reach single-digit inflation by end of this year. And in terms of growth, obviously this year, first 2 quarters will still be a negative, but there will be a recovery in the second half. As a result, overall full year, we would expect some small negative contraction, not as much as IMF predicted 3.7%. We think we would end up somewhere like 1 to 2% contraction this year, and from next year onwards, we will move into a positive growth path next year onwards. That's what we think.
Now, in the meantime, the central bank governor, also speaking to international media, said that Sri Lanka's sovereign lenders have yet to inform the government on how they wish to engage with the country to restructure its $7.1 billion debt. The central bank governor added that the lenders are also yet to inform the Sri Lankan officials on whether they will form an official committee or engage in bilateral talks.
Speaking to Reuters, Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe said it is up to creditors to decide on whether they are happy to have one platform, as it would be easier to discuss and share information. The island nation aims to formally engage in debt negotiations with overseas creditors that includes China, India and the Paris Club group of members in May after concluding a debt rework with holders of its domestic debt. The central bank chief went on to say that they have a comparable debt treatment even if the lenders decide to come together on a separate bilateral basis. During the interview with Reuters, Dr. Veerasinghe said that debt for nature swaps are useful and well-earned financial instruments. However, he highlighted that the country's main goal is to complete the debt rework process as soon as possible. He added to those sentiments saying if creditors say that they would like to have those instruments, that it can be done within the timeline and do it fast, Sri Lanka is open. The central bank governor went on to say that everyone can come and offer those kind of solutions, and as they engage with them, they can see whether to include them or not. Dr. Veerasinghe said that additional financing through the IMF's Resilience and Sustainability Trust to address climate change's impact on the economy could be available, but only after the country recovers its debt sustainability under the Washington-based lender program.
Now, the International Monetary Fund, quoting Japanese Finance Ministry, stated that Japan, India and France are scheduled to announce the launch of debt restructuring negotiation process for Sri Lanka tomorrow. Apart from the finance ministers of Japan, India and France, the IMF, World Bank and other international organizations are expected to participate in the event. Japan, India and France are scheduled to hold a press briefing tomorrow to announce the launch of the debt restructuring negotiation process on Sri Lanka. The International Monetary Fund communicated this, quoting the Japanese Finance Ministry. Accordingly, the finance ministers of the 3 creditor countries, Shunichi Suzuki, Bruno Le Maire and Nirmala Sitharaman, will join the press briefing planned to be held on the sidelines of the spring meetings of the IMF and the World Bank Group in Washington, D.C. The 3 creditor countries have been working closely for a coordinated debt restructuring process for the island nation. President Ranil Wickremesinghe and the Finance State Minister Shehan Semsinghe are expected to join the live streaming of the press briefing. In addition, the IMF, the World Bank and other international organizations as well as the private banks as well as the private sector will participate in the debt restructuring discussions. Now, while expressing the IMF support to Sri Lanka, Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, called on all Sri Lankans to come together to do their part to overcome the crisis. She said this during a meeting held with the Sri Lankan delegation, which is currently in the United States to participate in the World Bank IMF Spring meeting. Further, the Sri Lankan delegation has expressed the commitment to achieve debt sustainability and restore stability to the country.
The Sri Lanka delegation in the United States for the World Bank International Monetary Fund Spring meetings met with the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, yesterday. During the meeting, the IMF Managing Director pledged support to Sri Lanka during the difficult times and has also called on all Sri Lankans to come together to do their part to overcome the crisis. The Sri Lankan delegation, that includes State Minister of Finance Shehan Semsinghe, Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe and Treasury Secretary Mahinda Siriwardana, has reaffirmed Sri Lanka's commitment to complete the IMF program while continuing to implement the ambitious reform agenda to achieve its sustainability and restore economic stability. They have also reiterated the dedication at this historic time to build a prosperous country with the support and the trust of all international partners by building on the lessons learned from the crisis. Meanwhile, in another meeting, Sri Lankan delegation also met with the Executive Director of World Bank for Sri Lanka, Parameshwaran Iyer, and has discussed on World Bank's engagement and support to Sri Lanka along with the progress of economic recovery.
Now, in the meantime, the Asian Development Bank is considering to provide more concessionary funding and support for green bond issuances for Sri Lanka. The ADB's country director for Sri Lanka, Director Chen, said that their immediate priority for this year lies in maintaining economic stability and to support the banking and energy sectors of Sri Lanka. The Bloomberg reported that as part of the Asian Development Bank's assistance to help Sri Lanka recover, they are considering to provide more concessionary funding and support green bonds for the country. The ADB's country director for Sri Lanka, Chen, said that they are also actively working on mobilizing more concessional resources and grant resources to the country. He went on to say that this will hopefully be part of their assistance in the coming years. Chen said that the ADB is trying to mobilize funds below the already concessional ordinary capital resources facilities that Sri Lanka currently has access to at the moment. The Bloomberg reported Chen saying that the ADB has about $3.7 billion of previously approved loans in transport, energy, education, health, social protection, agriculture, and small and medium enterprises, among others, which will be dispersed as projects progress. Chen said Sri Lanka is now conducting an asset quality review of the banks with ADB's support and is discussing reforms to improve governance and financial sustainability for the power sector. The ADB is currently working with local authorities to prepare the groundwork to sell green or blue bonds after economic stability is restored. The ADB country director said that they hope in the long term the private sector can contribute more to the economy and that they would like to continue discussions with the private sector if there is emerging needs. Now, the Welfare Benefits Board announced that the welfare benefit payments will be made to eligible individuals starting from June this year. According to its chairman, B. Vijayaratne, the applications belonging to nearly 3.2 million households have been verified so far. Meanwhile, the information survey aimed at identifying eligible individuals for the Welfare Benefits Program came to an end on the 10th of April. The census work was originally scheduled to be completed by the 31st of March. However, the time period was later extended by 10 days. Further, Vijayawardena says that once the data census work is completed, the list of eligible candidates for the welfare benefits should be prepared and displayed at all divisional secretariats and the Gramin Ledari offices. All those who are not listed among the eligible candidates will then be given a period of 10 days to file their appeals and objections. The appeals and objections will then be examined by the respective committees at the Pradeshi Sabhas appointed by the district secretariats. And we'll be back with your business segment right after this short commercial break.
ගොඩමඩ පෙරලි කරන බලපුළුවන් කාරයා මහින්ද්‍රා යුවෝ ටීමෝ වෙතින්. වැඩම ගොඩයි ගොඩම තමයි. ස්වරාජ් ට්‍රැක්ටර් ටීමෝ වෙතින්. මේ අලුත් අවුරුද්දේ හිත පිරෙන ගනුදෙනුවකට හොඳම තැන හිත ගිය තැන බැංකුව HNB. දේශීය නගා සිටුවීම සහ සවිබල ගැන්වීම අපගේ පරමාර්ථයයි. පාසල් පිරියත සුරකිමු වැඩසටහන යටතේ පාසල් 3300ක් ප්‍රතිසංස්කරණය කිරීම. රුපියල් මිලියන 250ක් වටිනා සුබපැතුම් ශිෂ්‍යත්ව 2150ක්. අපේක්ෂා රෝහලට කරන ලද පරිත්‍යාග. 2022 ලෝක ළමා දිනය වෙනුවෙන් දෙමාපියන් දහසකට ජීවිත රක්ෂණ. ශ්‍රී ලංකා ඉන්ෂුරන්ස්. පියකුමෙන් මවකමෙන්.
Welcome back. The founder of the initiative Aramuna entrepreneur Dilip Jayavira says that creative ideas of entrepreneurs are essential to drive the country forward. Speaking at a symposium of the Aramuna series, Jayavira said that it is the entrepreneurs who can decide the future of Sri Lanka.
Another symposium of the initiative Aramuna was held in Chiloy yesterday under the patronage of its founder, entrepreneur Dilip Jayavira.
ශ්‍රී ලාංකික වෙළඳ ශේත්‍රයේ වෙළඳ ව්‍යාපාරවල තාම වැදගත් කොටසක් ඉටු කරන ජන කොටසක් තමයි මේ මුස්ලිම් ජන ප්‍රජාව. ඉතින් අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා ඔබගේ සහයෝගය ඔබගේ දැනුවත් බව ලංකාවේ ආර්ථිකය මෙහෙයවීමේදී ඉතා වැදගත් කියලා. මේ ඉම්පෝර්ට්ස් ප්‍රශ්නය බලපාලා තියෙන බව පේනවා මට විශේෂයෙන්ම ඔබ හා සම්බන්ධ ව්‍යාපාරවල. මොකද ඔබ වැඩියෙන්ම කරන්නේ ට්‍රේඩින්. මේ ට්‍රේඩින් වලට බලපාලා තියෙන බව අපි මේ පිළිබඳ විශේෂ අධ්‍යයනයක් කරලා ඒකට අවශ්‍ය විසඳුම් මොනවද කියලා හොයමින් ඉන්න කාලයක් මේ. අරමුණ සංවිධානය ඉදිරියට ඇවිල්ලා කතා කරන්නේ අපි හිතනවා රටක ඉදිරි ගමන තීරණය කළ යුත්තේ ඒ රටේ ඉන්න ව්‍යවසායකින් කියලා. මොකද ව්‍යවසායකින්ට පමණයි මේ රට ඉදිරියට ගෙනියන්න පුළුවන්. ඉතින් අපි කියන්නේ නිර්මාණශීලී බව තියෙන්නේ ව්‍යවසායකයෝ ළඟ. ඒගොල්ලෝ ක්‍රියේටිව්ලි හිතන දේ ජාතියට එකතු වෙන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට ඒක රජයට තේරෙන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට රජයත් ව්‍යවසායකත්ව රජයක් වෙන්න ඕනේ. entrepreneurial state එකක් වෙන්න ඕනේ.
The Sri Lankan shares closed higher for a third straight session today, supported by gains in financials and consumer staple stocks, with the turnover crossing 947 million rupees. The all-share price index rose by 0.04% to 9,415.28 points, while the S&P SL20 index meanwhile slipped by 0.55% to end at 2,754.23 points. The trading volume for the ASPI fell to 40.8 million shares from 84.3 million in the previous session. Meanwhile, the market turnover dropped to 947.5 million rupees from 1.67 billion rupees in the previous session. In the meantime, capital goods sector was the top contributor to the market turnover, while the transportation sector meanwhile was the second highest. Foreign investors were net sellers in the equity market, offloading stocks worth 56.8 million rupees of shares, while domestic investors purchased stocks worth 907.1 million rupees on a net basis. Now let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. Now, Japan has proposed developing an industrial hub in Bangladesh with supply chains to landlocked northeastern states in India and to Nepal and Bhutan, beyond by developing a port and transport in the region. The Japanese government had approved $1.27 billion in funding to Bangladesh for 3 infrastructure projects.
The move comes after Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's visit to India last month, during which he touted the idea of a new industrial hub for the Bay of Bengal and northeast India that could bolster development in the impoverished region of 300 million people. After Kishida's visit, the Japanese government approved $1.27 billion in funding to Bangladesh for 3 infrastructure projects. It includes a new commercial port in the Matabari area with links to adjacent landlocked Indian states, including Tripura, and wider international markets. The envisaged Matabari project would be Bangladesh's first deep-sea port capable of hosting large vessels. Japan's ambassador to India stated that it can be a win-win plan for India and Bangladesh, citing the industrial hub proposal at a meeting of Indian, Bangladeshi and Japanese officials in the Tripura state capital. He said the deep-sea port was likely to become operational by 2027 and would be a key to building an industrial hub connecting the Bangladesh capital Dhaka and landlocked areas of India.
And that's all the news we have for you this evening. Join us again tomorrow for the very latest news at the very same time. Tune into our social media pages for the very latest news. A pleasant evening and good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.